My grandmother left money for my college before she died. My parents gave it to my golden child brother so he could open a garage. They told me I was smart enough to figure college out on my own. They told me Derek needed one real chance. They told me family meant sacrifice. So I watched my dorm room, my textbooks, my engineering classes, and the future I had worked for get turned into hydraulic lifts, tool chests, a neon sign, and my brother's new office. At the grand opening, Derek gave a speech thanking everyone except me. Years later, when that garage collapsed under debt, unpaid taxes, lawsuits, and bad decisions, my parents came to my office and asked me to save it. That was when I finally understood the truth. They never thought they stole my future. They thought they had invested it in the son they actually believed in. My name is Caleb Morgan. I was 18 when I learned that being responsible in my family did not mean I would be protected. It meant I would be sacrificed first. My grandmother, Ruth Morgan, was the person who started my college fund. She was my father's mother, and she was the kind of woman who could make you feel loved and terrified in the same sentence. She wore cardigans in July, kept peppermints in her purse, and believed every problem in life could be improved with education, hard work, or a properly sharpened pencil. She used to tell me, "Caleb, a mind is the only tool nobody can take from you." I believed her. When I was a kid, I was the one taking apart broken radios, fixing the toaster, opening the back panel on old fans, and getting yelled at for leaving screws on the kitchen table. I liked machines because they were honest. If something was broken, there was a reason. A loose wire. A cracked belt. A burned motor. A failed switch. People were messier. My older brother Derek was 6 years older than me. He was the kind of guy people liked immediately. Confident smile, loud laugh, good hair, and just enough charm to make adults forget he had no follow-through. Derek was always starting something. A lawn care business that lasted 2 months. A mobile detailing idea that ended when he sold the pressure washer. A used car flipping plan that turned into my father paying off a mechanic. A fitness page online where he posted 3 videos, then declared the algorithm was against him. My parents called him ambitious. I called him expensive. Not out loud. I still wanted to survive dinner. My father, Richard Morgan, owned a small auto parts supply store in Greensboro, North Carolina. My mother, Helen, worked part-time at a dentist's office and full-time defending Derek from reality. Derek was their dreamer. I was their smart one. That sounds like a compliment until you realize smart meant I was expected to understand why I got less. When Derek needed money, he was chasing opportunity. When I needed money, I was old enough to plan better. When Derek failed, he was learning. When I struggled, I was being dramatic. My parents had this way of making my competence feel like a family resource. Caleb will understand. Caleb will figure it out. Caleb is smart. Caleb does not need as much help. By the time I was a senior in high school, I had a plan. North Carolina State University. Mechanical engineering. I had the acceptance letter printed and pinned above my desk for 3 weeks before graduation. I would stare at it at night like it was a door. My grades were good. I had some scholarship money, not enough to cover everything, but enough that with Grandma Ruth's college fund, I could go without drowning in debt. My parents had talked about that fund for years. "Your grandmother wanted you to have a future," Mom would say. Dad would nod and say, "That money is for school. Don't worry about it." So I did not worry. That was my mistake. I trusted people who had already shown me they treated Derek's dreams like emergencies and my dreams like optional upgrades. A month before orientation, we had dinner at my parents' house. I remember every detail because your brain does that with the night before something breaks. Mom made meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Dad sat at the head of the table, quiet. Derek was there too, which was unusual for a Tuesday unless he needed something or was hiding from someone who wanted payment. I was excited. I had been talking too much about class registration, engineering labs, housing, and whether I should buy used textbooks early or wait until professors confirmed the additions. Nobody was matching my energy. Mom kept looking at Dad. Dad kept cutting his meatloaf into smaller and smaller pieces. Derek kept checking his phone, then putting it face down like he was trying to look respectful and failing. Finally, I stopped talking. "What's going on?" I asked. Mom set her fork down. "Caleb, honey, we need to discuss something." That was never good. Dad cleared his throat. "It's about college." I sat up a little. "What about it?" Mom reached for my hand. I pulled it back without thinking. Her face tightened. Dad said, "The fund isn't available the way we thought it would be." For a second, I thought the market crashed. Or there were taxes. Or maybe Grandma had put restrictions on it nobody understood. "What does that mean?" Mom's eyes started shining. Derek looked at the wall. Dad said, "We made an investment." I stared at him. "What investment?" Nobody spoke. And that silence told me the answer before they did. I looked at Derek. He still would not meet my eyes. "No," I said. Mom said, "Caleb." "No." Dad's voice hardened. "Let me explain. You used my college fund for Derek. Mom started crying. Derek finally spoke. I didn't want them to tell you like this. I turned to him. That's your concern? He held up both hands. I was going to pay it back once the garage took off. The garage? Dad leaned forward. Your brother has a real opportunity. A building opened up near Wendover. Great location. Equipment included if we moved fast. It was now or never. I could barely hear him over the blood rushing in my ears. How much? Mom whispered. Most of it. Dad closed his eyes. All of it. The room went still. All of it. Grandma's money. My textbooks. My dorm deposit. My first year. My way out. Gone. Turned into Derek's newest chance. I stood up so fast the chair scraped backward. Grandma left that money for my education. Dad said, your grandmother wanted this family to succeed. No. She wanted me to go to college. Mom said, college will still be there. I looked at her. Will the money? She cried harder. Derek leaned forward, trying to sound humble. Look, man, I know this sucks. I laughed. That was probably the first time I sounded truly angry. It sucks? I'm saying I know it's not ideal. Not ideal is getting a bad dorm room. Not ideal is an 8 a.m. class. You spent my college fund. Dad snapped. Watch your tone. I turned to him. You gave away my future and you're worried about my tone? Mom said, Caleb, you are smart enough to get scholarships. You can work part-time. You can take loans. Derek needed one real chance. That sentence changed something in me. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But something shifted. Derek needed one real chance. Apparently I did not. Apparently, the future I had worked for could be delayed, borrowed against, scrambled together, because I was smart. Because I was responsible. Because I would figure it out. Derek looked at me with fake guilt. I'm going to make this right. I said. No. You're not. His expression hardened for half a second. There he was. The real Derek. Not the sorry brother. The man who thought my anger was inconvenient. Dad stood. That is enough. We did what we thought was best for the family. No. I said. You did what was best for Derek. Mom whispered, family means sacrifice. I looked at her. Funny how I'm always the one being sacrificed. Nobody answered. Because there was no answer. I left that night with the acceptance letter still pinned above my desk at home and no idea how I was going to pay for the future everyone kept telling me I was smart enough to build alone. 2 weeks later, Derek signed the lease on the garage. Morgan Performance Garage. He had a logo before he had a payroll system. Black and chrome sign. Red letters. A slogan too, because of course he had a slogan. Built for power. Driven by passion. I wanted to throw up every time I saw it. My parents acted like the garage was a family victory. Mom posted photos of Derek standing in front of the building with his arms crossed. Dad wrote, proud of my son for chasing his dream. His dream, not my money, not grandma's gift. His dream, I had deferred my enrollment. That is a clean phrase for something that feels like swallowing glass. Deferred enrollment. It sounds temporary, organized, responsible. What it meant was that I watched my friends pack for college while I picked up extra shifts at an auto parts warehouse and tried to figure out community college enrollment after most deadlines had already passed. The day Derek had his grand opening, my parents insisted I attend. I told them I had work. Dad said, this matters to your brother. I said, college mattered to me. He hung up. Mom called 10 minutes later crying. I went. I still hate that I went. The garage looked good. I will give him that. Fresh paint. New lifts, tool chests lined up against the wall, office with glass windows. A coffee machine in the waiting area. Mounted TV, a polished concrete floor that reflected the overhead lights. People walked around impressed. Derek built this from nothing. Someone said. From nothing. I stood there and looked at the hydraulic lifts. That used to be my dorm room. I looked at the tool cabinets. That used to be my textbooks. I looked at the sign. That used to be my engineering lab. Derek gave a speech. He thanked Mom and Dad for believing in him. He thanked his friends for support. He thanked the community for showing up. He thanked Grandma Ruth for always teaching us to dream big. I almost walked out right there. Grandma Ruth did not teach us to dream big. She taught us to sharpen pencils, show up on time, and keep promises. But dead people cannot correct speeches. I guess that is why people use them so freely. Derek did not mention me. Not once. Afterward, Mom came over with wet eyes. Wasn't that beautiful? I stared at her. He didn't thank me. Her face changed. Caleb, don't start. Don't start? Today is about Derek. Of course it is. She lowered her voice. You are going to ruin this with bitterness. I laughed under my breath. Bitterness? Mom, that entire building is made of my college fund. She looked around, embarrassed. Keep your voice down. That told me everything. She was not ashamed of what they had done. She was ashamed someone might hear me say it. I left early. Derek texted me later. Could have at least acted happy for me. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied. Could have at least acted sorry. He did not respond. My life changed after that. Not all at once, because real life does not respect dramatic timing. I did not magically become successful the next month. I worked. That was it. I worked at the warehouse in the morning, took evening classes at community college, and picked up weekend repair jobs from people who knew I was good with machines. I lived in a cheap apartment with thin walls and a bathroom fan that sounded like a dying lawn mower. My former classmates posted dorm pictures, football games, late-night pizza, lecture halls, campus libraries. I posted nothing. There was nothing to post. Here's me eating a gas station sandwich in my car before night class. Does not exactly inspire likes. I was angry for a long time. Not movie anger. Not punching walls. More like a low electrical hum under everything. I was angry when I bought used textbooks with torn covers. Angry when I filled out financial aid forms. Angry when a professor asked why I had not gone straight to university with my grades. Angry when mom called to tell me Derek had gotten his first big client. Angry when dad said, "Your brother is really building something." I was building something too. Nobody called it that. Then I met Marcus Reed. Marcus owned a fleet maintenance shop on the edge of Greensboro. He was in his late 50s, broad-shouldered, bald, and had the kind of face that made customers stop lying about when the check engine light came on. I met him because I delivered parts to his shop. One afternoon, one of his techs was struggling with a diagnostic issue on a delivery van. I was waiting for a signature, heard the engine, and asked if they had checked the ground connection near the control module. The tech gave me a look. Marcus did not. He said, "Why?" I explained. He listened. They checked it. I was right. Marcus signed the delivery slip and said, "You looking for better work?" That was Marcus. No inspirational speech. No dramatic moment. Just a question that changed my life. I started working for him part-time, then full-time. He taught me diagnostics, fleet systems, customer communication, estimating, billing, inventory, contracts, warranty disputes, and the art of telling a customer no without making them feel stupid. He was hard on me. Fair, but hard. If I was late, he said so. If I messed up an estimate, he made me redo it. If I guessed instead of verified, he made me start over. One night, after I stayed late fixing a generator control issue, he handed me a soda and said, "You're good because you listen to machines before you force them." I looked at him. What? Most young guys want to prove they're smart. You want to understand the problem. That's rare. I did not know what to say. Praise felt strange when it did not come with a request afterward. Marcus became the first adult man in my life who expected a lot from me without taking from me. My parents gave Derek money. Marcus gave me standards. That mattered more. Years passed. Slow years, hard years. I finished an associate degree first, then took classes toward engineering technology while working full-time. I did not get the clean path Grandma Ruth planned for me, but I kept moving. Derek's garage looked successful from the outside. He posted constantly. Custom cars. Before and after engine builds. Happy customers. New equipment. A motorcycle he claimed was a marketing asset. He also posted captions like, "Built from nothing," and, "No handouts, just hustle." I blocked him after that. Not because it surprised me. Because I deserved to stop letting him spit on my future from a distance. By my late 20s, Marcus made me operations manager. By 30, I had started taking consulting work for small shops and industrial clients who needed equipment maintenance systems. By 32, I launched my own company. Stone Creek Automation. We serviced commercial equipment, fleet systems, industrial controls, and specialty machinery. Not glamorous. Not Instagram friendly. But necessary. I liked necessary. Necessary paid invoices. Necessary built trust. Necessary did not need neon signs and fake humility. I built Stone Creek slowly. 3 employees. Then 6. Then 12. Then contracts with regional warehouses, food processing plants, and municipal fleet departments. I bought a modest office with a small shop floor behind it. The first time I put my company name on the glass door, I stood there for a minute longer than I needed to. Stone Creek Automation. No Morgan. That was intentional. During those years, my contact with my family became limited. Mom sent birthday texts. Dad called once in a while, usually awkward, usually about Derek or the garage. Derek did not call unless he wanted something technical. I stopped answering. I had dinner with them twice a year, mostly out of habit and guilt. Every time, Derek dominated the conversation. Expansion plans. New service packages. High-end clients, possible franchise model. Mom looked at him like he was Elon Musk with a tire machine. Dad nodded like every unpaid invoice was just a stepping stone. I noticed things though. I always notice systems. Derek's stories did not add up. Too much equipment. Too many employees. Too many discounts. Too many big months coming. Dad looked more tired every year. Mom talked about cutting expenses. Derek drove a newer truck than anyone else at the table. And every time I asked a practical question, the room changed. What are your margins on custom builds? Derek would smirk. You wouldn't get it. It's not just numbers. What about payroll taxes? Dad would say, don't interrogate your brother. Are you carrying vendor debt? Mom would say, Caleb, please. Not at dinner. So I stopped asking. Some disasters have to arrive at the door before people stop calling them dreams. The first real warning came from a cousin named Hannah. She messaged me one night. Hey, this is weird, but is Derek's garage okay? I stared at the text. Why? My boyfriend's company stopped sending trucks there. Something about unpaid parts vendors and bad paperwork. I thought you might know. I wrote back, I don't. And technically, I didn't, but I suspected. 2 months later, Mom called in the middle of a workday. I was in a meeting with a plant manager about a conveyor shutdown. When I saw her name, I ignored it. She called again, then Dad, then Mom again. I stepped out. What happened? Mom's voice was soft. That same soft voice from the night my college fund disappeared. We need to talk about Derek. I closed my eyes. There it was. The bill for my stolen future had finally come due. They came to my office the next morning. My parents had never visited Stone Creek before. Not when I opened it. Not when I hired my first team. Not when I landed the municipal contract that basically changed my life. But Derek was in trouble, so suddenly they knew the address. My assistant brought them into the conference room. Mom looked smaller than I remembered. Dad looked older, stiff, and uncomfortable in the way men get when they need help but resent the person they need it from. They glanced around the office. The glass wall, the project boards, the frame certifications, the employees working at computers and shop benches. Mom said, "You've done so well." I sat across from them. Yes. Dad cleared his throat. "We're proud of you." That sentence arrived about 14 years late and carrying luggage. "What do you need?" I asked. Mom flinched. Dad looked annoyed. "We wanted to see you." "No, you didn't." Mom whispered, "Caleb, you called 3 times during a workday. You're here because Derek has a problem." Dad leaned back. "Fine. The garage is struggling." "How badly?" Mom started twisting a tissue in her hands. Dad said, "There are some debts." "What kind?" "Vendor debt." "What else?" "Equipment loans." "What else?" "Payroll tax issues." I looked at him. He looked away. "What else?" Mom started crying. "Our house is tied to some of it." There it was. Of course. I was not surprised. That almost made it worse. "How much?" I asked. Dad said, "We don't have all the numbers." "Yes. You do. You just don't want to say them." Mom cried harder. Dad's voice sharpened. "We came here for help, not judgment." I leaned forward. "You spent my college fund on his garage. You protected him from every consequence. You co-signed loans. You put your house behind his business. Now you're sitting in my office asking me not to judge the results." Silence. Mom said, "We made mistakes." I looked at her. "What mistake?" She blinked. "What?" "Name it." "We trusted too much." "No." Dad frowned. "Caleb." "No, you don't get to skip the part where you say what you did." Mom's mouth trembled. "We used your college money." "For?" "For Derek's business." "And what did that cost me?" She cried silently. Dad stared at the table. I waited. Finally, Mom whispered, "Your chance to go to school the way you planned." That sentence hurt. Even now. Even after everything I had built. Because I had needed her to understand that when I was 18. Not when Derek's garage needed a lifeboat. Dad said, "You understand operations now. You could look at the books. Maybe help restructure things." I almost smiled. "You used my future to buy his dream. Now you want me to use my present to save it." Dad said, "That's not fair." "No, Dad, that is exactly fair." Mom reached across the table. "We are still your family. My college fund was family too." She pulled her hand back. I agreed to review the documents. Not because I planned to save the garage. Because I wanted to know the truth in numbers. People can argue with feelings. Numbers are harder to manipulate. Derek sent the files 2 days later, along with a message. "Try not to act like you're enjoying this." That was Derek. Drowning and still worried about being looked down on. The documents were a disaster. Unpaid payroll taxes. Vendor claims. Equipment loans with brutal terms. Customer disputes. A lawsuit over an unfinished restoration. Credit lines maxed out. Personal guarantees from my parents. A home equity loan tied to their house. And worst of all, no real internal bookkeeping. It looked like Derek had been running the business by instinct, ego, and whatever bill screamed loudest that week. I spent a weekend reviewing everything. By Sunday night, I knew the answer. Morgan Performance Garage was dead. It just had not stopped moving yet. I called a meeting at the garage. Not my office. The garage. I wanted them to stand inside the thing they had built with my future and tell me I owed them more. When I arrived, the sign looked faded. The chrome letters were peeling at one corner. The waiting area smelled like old coffee and stress. Invoices were stacked behind the front counter. One of the lifts had a warning tag on it. The same garage that once looked like my stolen future now looked like a warning label. Derek was in the office with Mom and Dad. He looked tired. Not humbled. Tired. There is a difference. His hair was messy. His shirt had a stain near the collar. He had gained weight and lost the sharp edge of confidence he used to carry like a weapon. He stood when I walked in. Caleb. Derek. No hug. No handshake. I placed my folder on the desk. Dad said, "Thank you for coming." I called the meeting. His face tightened. Mom sat in the corner, holding her purse in both hands. Derek crossed his arms. "So what's the verdict? Genius?" I looked at him. "The verdict is that you are insolvent, behind on taxes, exposed to vendor lawsuits, and personally responsible for obligations your parents were stupid enough to guarantee." Dad snapped, "Watch it." I turned to him. "No." He froze. "I watched my tone at 18 when you told me my college fund was gone. I watched my tone at the grand opening. I watched my tone every time Derek said he built this place from nothing. I'm done watching my tone." Mom whispered, "Please don't fight." I looked at her. "This is not a fight. This is an autopsy." Derek scoffed. "You always wanted this." "No. Derek. I wanted to go to college." That shut him up for half a second. Then he said, "You did fine." There it was. The family excuse in 3 words. You did fine. I survived, so the theft did not count. I built something, so they did not really hurt me. I became successful, so they could treat my stolen path like character development. I stepped closer to his desk. "I did fine despite you. Not because what you did was okay." Derek looked away. I opened the folder. The garage cannot be saved without a large capital injection, tax negotiation, debt restructuring, vendor settlement, legal defense, and management replacement. Dad's face changed. Management replacement? Yes. Derek laughed bitterly. Of course. You want my business. No, I said. I don't want this mess anywhere near my company. Mom looked confused. But you just said management. I said what would be required. I didn't say I was doing it. The room went still. Dad stared at me. You're not helping? I am helping. I'm telling you the truth. Derek slammed his hand on the desk. Truth doesn't pay the tax bill. No. Neither did you. His face went red. Dad stood. Caleb. Enough. No. Let's talk about enough. I pointed to the garage floor outside the office. That lift? My college fund. Those tool chests? My college fund. That sign? My college fund. The office furniture. The paint. The opening inventory. The first lease payments? My future. Mom started crying. I kept going. At 18, I was told college could wait because Derek's dream couldn't. I was told family meant sacrifice. I was told I was smart enough to figure it out. And I did. I figured it out. I worked nights. I took classes part-time. I ate cheap food. I watched people my age move forward while I rebuilt a path you had already sold. Dad looked down. Derek muttered. Nobody forced you to. I turned on him. Finish that sentence. He did not. Say it, I said. Nobody forced me to what? Work? Survive? Build a company without the money Grandma left for me? He looked away. That's what I thought. Mom said. We thought the garage would help the whole family. No, you thought Derek succeeding would make your choice look right. She covered her mouth. I looked at Dad. And you thought if I survived, then what you did wasn't that bad. Dad's voice was quieter now. That's not true. Then why did you never apologize until the garage started failing? He had no answer. Derek said, what do you want from me? You want me to say I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry. I looked at him. That is not an apology. That is a receipt you're trying to hand me before the bill. He threw his hands up. What do you want me to do? Beg? No. I want you to understand that I already paid for this business once. I am not paying for its funeral too. Mom sobbed. Dad said, we could lose the house. I nodded. Yes. You would let that happen? I am not letting anything happen. You sign the papers. We did it for family. My college fund was family too. That landed. I could see it hit mom first. Then dad. Maybe for the first time, they heard it without an excuse ready. I picked up the folder and slid a sheet across the desk. This is a list of bankruptcy attorneys, tax professionals, and business liquidation consultants. Call them. Tell them the truth. Follow their advice. Dad stared at the paper. That's it? That's more than you gave me when you spent my future. Mom whispered. Caleb. Please. I turned to her. I love you. I think some part of me always will. But I will not risk my company, my employees, my home, or the life I built to save the business you built by sacrificing me. Derek said, So you're just walking away? I looked around the office. The faded sign. The unpaid invoices. The tool calendar on the wall. The old framed photo from the grand opening, where Derek stood in front of the garage smiling, and I was barely visible in the background. Yes, I said. I learned from the best. Then I left. The garage closed 4 months later. Morgan Performance Garage announced it on social media with a post about challenging market conditions and future opportunities. Derek still could not just say he failed. The vendor lawsuit became public. The tax debt became uglier. My parents sold their house before the bank could force a worse outcome. They moved into a small rental outside town. Mom called it downsizing, Dad called it temporary. I called it consequences, but only to myself. Relatives reached out. Aunt Paula said, You could have saved them. I replied, I already gave this family my college fund once. You called it Derek's chance. Then I blocked her. Derek sent a long message one night. He said I was cold. He said I acted superior. He said he had lost everything and hoped I was happy. I did not respond. Because I was not happy. That was the part people like Derek never understand. Boundaries are not always satisfying. Sometimes they are just necessary. I did not enjoy watching my parents lose their house. I did not enjoy watching my brother fail. I did not wake up every morning celebrating karma with coffee. What I felt was quieter. Sadness, relief, distance. Like finally setting down something heavy and realizing your hands still hurt from holding it too long. About a year after the garage closed, I visited Grandma Ruth's grave. I had not been there in a long time. Too long, probably. It was a cool Sunday morning in October. Leaves were scattered across the grass. I brought a small bouquet of yellow flowers because Grandma liked yellow and said white flowers looked too much like apologies. Her headstone was simple. Ruth Morgan. Beloved mother and grandmother. I stood there for a while with my hands in my jacket pockets. Then I said, I'm sorry. The wind moved through the trees. I'm sorry they spent what you left me. I swallowed. And I'm sorry I spent so many years feeling like I failed you because I didn't get there the way you wanted. For a long time, I had carried shame that did not belong to me. Shame that I did not go straight to NC State. Shame that I worked warehouses and night shifts instead of living in dorms and joining study groups. Shame that my path looked messy. But standing there, I finally understood something. Grandma had not believed in a campus. She believed in me. The money was supposed to make the road easier, yes. And my parents stole that ease. I will never pretend they did not. But they did not steal my mind. They did not steal my discipline. They did not steal the part of me that listened to machines before forcing them. They spent the fund. They did not destroy the future. I built it anyway. I said quietly. Not the way you planned, but I built it. A few weeks later, I created a scholarship through Stone Creek. Nothing huge at first. Just enough to help one community college student each year who was working while studying engineering technology or industrial maintenance. The first recipient was a 19-year-old girl named Marissa who worked nights at a grocery store and wanted to become an automation technician. When I handed her the award letter, she cried. I almost did too, which would have been embarrassing for both of us. Afterward, I sat in my truck for a few minutes and thought about Grandma Ruth. A mind is the only tool nobody can take from you. She was right. But money can still change the road. Support still matters. Belief still matters. And I wanted at least one person to know their future was not something their family got to reassign. My parents heard about the scholarship through someone else. Mom emailed me. Your grandmother would be proud. I read that line several times. Then I replied. I know, that was all. Maybe that sounds cold. It did not feel cold. It felt honest. Derek eventually found work managing a service counter at a dealership. I heard that from a cousin before I blocked the last family group chat. Maybe it will be good for him. Maybe having a boss, a schedule, and limits will teach him what family money never did. I do not hate him. That surprises people when I say it. But hate is a kind of attachment. And Derek has already taken enough of my time. My parents still send messages on holidays. Sometimes I answer with one sentence. Sometimes I do not answer at all. I have not completely cut them off, but I no longer let them close enough to rewrite my life. There is a difference between forgiveness and access. I can accept that they are flawed people who made a terrible choice. I do not have to give them another chance to make me pay for it. Stone Creek kept growing. Not fast. Steady. I like steady. We now have 30 employees, a training program, and contracts I once would have been afraid to even bid on. Marcus still visits sometimes. He complains about my coffee machine, insults my filing system, and tells new hires I used to look like a sad raccoon with a socket wrench. He is not wrong. Nora came into my life later. I did not mention her earlier because she was not part of the wound. She was part of the healing. She is a civil engineer, practical, funny, and allergic to nonsense in a way I deeply admire. When I told her the whole story, she did not say, "But they're your parents." She said, "They spent your future," and then asked for interest. I knew I loved her right then. One evening, we were walking through downtown after dinner, and she asked, "Do you ever wonder who you would have been if they hadn't taken the fund?" I thought about it. The clean path. NC State. Dorm rooms. Engineering labs. Maybe internships. Maybe a different career. Maybe less anger. Maybe fewer scars. Yeah, I said. Sometimes. Does it hurt? Sometimes. She nodded. Then I said, "But I like who I became." That was the truth. Not because what happened was okay. Not because pain made me better in some magical way. Pain is not a gift. People say that when they want suffering to sound useful. What happened to me was wrong. It cost me years. It cost me ease. It cost me trust. But I built a life anyway. And I am proud of that. My parents gave my college fund to my golden child brother because they said he needed it more. Years later, when his dream collapsed, they asked me to save it. But I had finally learned something they never wanted me to understand. A future is not less valuable just because the person chasing it is responsible. A dream does not become more important because the loudest person is holding it. And family does not get to spend your life, then call you selfish, when you refuse to pay again. I already paid once. I paid with the dorm room I never moved into. The textbooks I never bought. The campus I never got to walk as a freshman. The clean road Grandma Ruth tried to give me. I paid with night shifts, cheap meals, community college parking lots, sore hands, and years of doing everything the hard way. But I will not pay again. Not for Derek's garage. Not for my parents' guilt. Not for a family story where my sacrifice only matters when they need another one. I built my future anyway. And this time, I did not let them spend it. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you really like our videos, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.